Anyway, welcome everybody to the Board of Supervisors special session. It's March 1st, 2020, and we are in session. First item of business is work session, redistricting presentation discussion regarding redistricting process and existing potential Board of Supervisor district maps A, B, C, and possible discussion formulation of additional map scenarios using county's mapping software. Mr. Quist, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. Alan Quist with the County Attorney's Office. And Madam Clerk, if I could please have the presentation displayed. From February of last year to the present, the county has held 7 board meetings and 8 community meetings on the topic of redistricting. In addition, the county's communication director, James Daniels, has led an impressive multi-pronged public outreach campaign on this topic. Accordingly, this morning's brief presentation on redistricting may sound a bit like a broken record. And if so, that may be a good thing. It may mean that the message is getting out to the public's being educated on these topics. In any event, I'm hopeful that this brief refresher will be useful to members of the public who may have taken a more recent interest in this redistricting process. At the outset, I should emphasize that we are not here today because county staff or even the Board of Supervisors sat down and said, gee, I think it might be a good time or convenient time to change all of the county's Board of Supervisor district lines. That is not why we are here today. We are here because the county is legally required to redistrict its Board of Supervisor lines this year. As you are aware, every 10 years following the release of federal census data, the decennial census, the county must evaluate its 5 supervisorial districts to ensure that the population deviations, the difference between the largest populated and the smallest populated districts, do not exceed 10%. And in fact, our recommendation is that those deviations get closer to 5% or possibly even below that 5% mark if possible. Based on 2020 census data, the populations of the county's 5 supervisorial districts are out of balance. For example, the population of District 2 is almost 42,000. District 2 has almost 42,000 more people than District 1. That's a deviation of almost 50%. Accordingly, the county has to redistrict its lines, and it has to redistrict those lines this year. And this slide here shows those deviations based on 2020 census data and the current Board of Supervisor district map. Typically, the deadline for census-driven changes to the county's Board of Supervisor district map would have been last year. It would have been December 1st, 2021. However, there has been a snowballing effect of delays that started with the delay in the U.S. Census data, which delayed the congressional and legislative district lines that the IRC, the Independent Redistricting Commission, is responsible for, which now in turn has delayed the Board of Supervisor district lines. In recognition of these delays, the Arizona legislature passed a law extending the county's Board of Supervisor district line deadline from last year into this year. What has not been extended, however, and cannot be delayed, it's a hard deadline, is the 2022 election, which is fast approaching. As you know, more work goes into an election, more work and preparation than merely gathering and tabulating ballots in November for the primary and in August for the general election. Working backwards from the actual dates of the election, We have candidate filing deadlines. We have many, many thousands of updates that need to be made within the voter registration system. Those updates, it's called AVID, the system that is used. Those updates need to be populated, and then from those updates, these thousands of voter registration cards have to be produced and mailed out, given all of the changes that are occurring with redistricting. Based on these election-related considerations, final BOS lines and Justice Court precinct lines should be decided upon by no later than tomorrow's Board of Supervisors meeting. To assist in the redistricting process, and this will be a review for many people, but the county, the board adopted these 9 redistricting principles in March of last year. And the core principle is the first principle, representation, which I mentioned earlier, and that's in regards to the 10% deviation allowed between the smallest and largest populated districts. And that principle is based on Arizona statute and U.S. court precedent. And as you'll see there, that principle uses the more mandatory must language. The only other principle on this list that uses that mandatory language would be the third principle down from the top, contiguity. And that principle essentially stands for the proposition that parts of a district must be connected at some point. As you'll see, the remaining principles use the more permissive should language. And these principles, in certain situations, may actually conflict with each other. And there must be a weighing and balancing of these various principles during the redistricting process. For example, it's impossible to create 5 perfectly compact square districts without running afoul of a variety of some of these other principles. Similarly, it's virtually impossible to avoid splitting any cities or towns. That's principle 5. While splits should be minimized to the extent possible, the current BOS map, and I believe all of the proposed maps, including a map proposed by one of the cities, would split other cities and towns. Indeed, if you even look beyond Pinal County, look at Maricopa County's Board of Supervisor map, look at Pima County's Board of Supervisor map, and you'll see that splitting towns and cities tends to be the norm, not the exception. As to principles 6 and 7, if you go down there on the list, preserving the cores of prior districts and avoiding the pairing of incumbents. It's important to note here that the Board of Supervisor redistricting process is not subject to the same redistricting rules that apply to the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission, or IRC. Article 4, Part 2 of the Arizona Constitution establishes special rules that pertain to just the IRC. The IRC, unlike the county, is required to start with a blank slate when it redistricts. And it is not allowed to consider incumbent addresses. In contrast, at the county level, redistricting is governed by court precedent, and the U.S. Supreme Court has found that it can be a worthwhile goal in the redistricting process to, among other things, preserve the cores of prior districts and avoid contests between incumbent representatives. That being said, ultimately, the weighing and balancing of these permissive redistricting principles lies with you, the board, in determining the final map that will be approved. That is a basic overview of the redistricting timeline, the redistricting process. I'd like to turn some time over now to James Daniels, the county's Director of Communications, to summarize the county's public outreach efforts in regards to redistricting.
Good morning. James Daniels, the Communications and Marketing Director for the county. So through the month of February, over a 3-week period, we did hold 8 community meetings across Pinal County to solicit feedback on the justice precincts and the supervisor districts, and we publicized these through our social media channels, our email newsletter, press coverage, and we put ads in the Tri-Valley Dispatch and the Copper Corridor newspapers. Overall, I think we had around 200 people who attended those eight meetings, and between them they left 52 pieces of handwritten public input at those meetings. We also put together a dedicated web page which was live through the month of February. And I've actually got updated data as of yesterday, which shows that we had 1,294 unique page views, a total of 1,933 visitors to that web page during the month of February. Alan, as well, you may have seen, created a video presentation, but it was about 5 minutes in length, which was a good explainer video, I believe, to the public to help them understand what the process was and how they could have their input. And as of yesterday, that had 688 unique viewers, a total of 833, so several people were watching it more than once. And we allowed we encouraged comments to be submitted electronically through the website, and as of yesterday, we had received 77 comments through the website, bringing a total number of comments to 129 as of yesterday afternoon. All of those comments are viewable through the website in a Google Doc, and folks have been looking at them as they've come in. And public can continue to submit input until 5 p.m. this evening. So that's the bulk of what I had to say. I'm happy to sum up some of the main themes that came out of those comments, or to take any other questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Not at the moment. Well, this is easy. Okay. Thank you, James.
Chairman, if I can, just for the record, if I can state that the updated presentation that James was referencing was submitted to the clerk for the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Alan Quist again. With that background, we have here this morning with us Randy Hampton and Sarah Hess with the county's mapping team. They have access to the county's mapping program. Should be able to pull that up this morning. And the hope is that the board can now discuss some of the maps and discuss potential adjustments to the maps, any potential new maps that the board would like to discuss or put forward, that those can be discussed, viewed if necessary with our mapping team, and so that those can be prepared and added for potential consideration for tomorrow's meeting, for the BOS meeting on Wednesday. With that, I'd go ahead and turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, and the board to see if there are particular scenarios or potential maps that the board would like to explore or discuss during today's session.
Thank you, Mr. Quist. And I would just like to say that all of this, I want to thank Randy and Sarah for all the work they put in. I know they come in looking kind of bleary-eyed every now and then, like, oh my gosh, I watched way too much TV today, you know. So. But in the end, you know, it's not about, you know, it's about all of us. It's not just one person, one area, and one town. You know, Pinal County has a wide variety of rural, urban, agricultural, and native lands. You know, we supervisors are expected to represent not only the 85,000 residents in our own districts, but all Pinal County residents. So when considering policies, programs, codes, budgets, economic development, and quality of life, that's what we do. So we're charged to work as a team to make Pinal County the best it can be and plan for a prosperous future. So that's my scripted thing. So anyway, with that said, does anyone have any other comments?
Yeah, I don't really want to get into discussing the actual lines on the map yet. I just want to talk about some things that I know that the residents are going to possibly bring up if we do go with some of these scenarios, which we haven't talked about yet, and I think the public doesn't even know that we're down to now letter D. There was A and B that we showed at most of the little town halls, and then there was C, and now there's even another one on the board now. In that, there was an election in 2020, and that if we do some of these, this is all new to some of us up here, even though we've been public servants before, but we would be putting some areas into supervisor districts that did not vote for any of us. So I don't know if this would maybe for Chris, is that unprecedented to, they had no say in, they would be stuck with whoever they get for the next few years until there is an election, and they can make the adjustments and vote in folks that they want. So that's just, like I said, that's an issue that's already come up. So I want to get that out there about how is it that you can put someone in there that was not elected in your area.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Surtee, Alan and I have discussed this along with several of the other counties out there that are going through the same process that you all are going through right now, and how the fact that the timing of all this, it's just coincidentally happens to happen in an off election year for the Board of Supervisors. Alan, you want to expound on that a little bit more as to what the research has found and how this really plays out?
Certainly. I think cutting to the heart of the question there, Supervisor Surtee, is that is just part and parcel of the redistricting. Oh,
turn your mic on, please. You're loud,
just
but
got to
you're
get a
not
little
that
closer
loud.
there. That is just part and parcel to the redistricting process. There will be changes in who a person's Board of Supervisor representative is. That is part of the process that occurs. And it's not a process that happens very frequently. The law says that it must be done every 10 years if there are these imbalances. And it does allow for permissive changes during that in-between decennial census periods, but those don't occur very frequently from what I've seen. But there will be changes in who people represent. And I don't know if Chris wanted to add to that at all, or yeah.
Yeah, I know there's no easy answers. I just know that that's one of the concerns is that, hey, who is this guy? I didn't vote for him, and here then all at once he is. So yeah, I'll represent whatever area I'm given to the best of my abilities, and hopefully we can come up with something that's fair and equitable.
Everybody knows who you are. You're the guy with the dog. Okay. All right. So let's see. I see waving at the other end. Supervisor Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Just real quick, I guess we end up with a new map. We'll have a new map tomorrow. But when does everything take place? In other words, is at that point in time, the constituents change, your boundaries change, everything changes that day? I mean, what's the timeline of actually implementing these new boundaries?
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Miller, we have also discussed this type of scenario and possible delay effects to some things being effective. Alan, you want to go through the proposed timeline that staff has come up with and how it would play out for the Board of Supervisors, and when, if a new district line is drawn, when it would become operationally effective for them?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Some of the potential resolution language that we're working with specifically for the Board of Supervisor district maps would have them be effective for election and voter registration purposes practically immediately, March 30th or March 3rd, effective immediately that date. That would enable, the reason for doing that is that would enable the county recorder to start this monumental task of updating everything in Avid, all of the congressional district lines, the legislative district lines, the voter precincts, the justice court lines, all of the lines that are changing so that they can go through as part of one process and make those changes. As far as the effective date for all other purposes, including administrative, budgetary, logistical, basically when the representation actually switches, going back to Supervisor Surtees' question, the thought would be to make that effective, that component of it effective June 30th. The reason for that is it would give time for planning if changes need to be made in office locations or other associated issues. It also would be within the new statutory drop-dead deadline for redistricting, which would be July 1st for the Board of Supervisor district lines. So that was the thought that staff had, and I got to credit Himanshu Patel, County Manager here, for coming up with that idea, that potential idea for the resolutions.
Thank you, Mr. Quist. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Just a comment based off of what Supervisor Surtees said. I'm either going to have 42,000 people pissed off at me or 42,000 going, yeah, he's gone, thank goodness.
That's the way with politics. All right. So to that, we've had lots of comments on A and B and C. As Supervisor Surtees alluded to, there's a map D. Could you please bring that up? You, the royal you, you.
Chairman, also map D has been attached to the actual agenda item as well for the record for the public.
Thank you. Are you going to show the population and deviation? Okay. It's the speed of light, right? Use the mic, Randy.
So here's the boundary for possible D. Well, we had it before. I just haven't had time to rename it. But here's the population deviations within the map right now.
And I believe that's like 5.1, is that?
Yes, sir,
right
5.1 on the latest. Here's the voter precincts with the census blocks that we use to work with making the maps. And on the right, here's the populations for each district and the deviations, population and percentage-wise.
Does anyone have any questions?
just according to my size, I can turn in my pickup and get a moped, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't need a county vehicle.
No, I don't.
You need a county bicycle. That'll be great. We'll get, or maybe like a scooter. That'd be
Yeah.
pretty cool. Electric scooter.
There you go. Save us money.
Supervisor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is Map D. I just received an email in support of Map C from Mayor Michael Powell, and he asked me to just include that comment in the record, so he likes Map C. Have we shown Map C on the screen yet?
We have not.
Okay.
I bet that that's possible.
So, and my question is, the Map D we're seeing, is that a derivative? Do we start with Map C and arrive at this plan?
Somewhat.
Okay.
It took C into consideration and adjusted around it, and to bring the numbers down and to bring districts down to convenient size.
Right. And so, Mr. Chairman, as you know from our public discussions in the past, my emphasis is having the most compact districts possible so that we can service our districts well. And some years ago, the long L-shaped District 4 was created. That's an enormous drive for a supervisor. The district, our current District 1, is an enormous amount of territory. And so my number one emphasis in this process has been to create the most compact and serviceable districts so that citizens have an opportunity to interact with the supervisors that we can provide good service. So that's my comment on this, on the Map D.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Quist? Oh, Mr. Patel.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Himanshu Patel, Supervisor Kavanaugh, Map C in the ELO area is consistent with Map D.
Okay, so D and C are consistent.
For the ELO area.
Okay.
And it represents what ELO has provided in terms of official comments to incorporate precinct 112, 13, and 14 into District 3.
And Mr. Chairman, I see members, the biggest change obviously on Map D is where Mr. Chairman, you were elected in the city of Maricopa and representing that district. That's the most enormous change. District 1 is left with only 2 precincts of the former District 1 and encompasses the north area, the dark blue, yeah, there you go, and then the city of Maricopa. And I see representatives from the city of Maricopa here, and while they're, this would be an extraordinary change for them. So are we having a public comment? Can we allow public comment or input or testimony from those folks?
I believe we've received quite a bit of public comment on all these maps.
Okay. But there's
so
nothing here today.
Not today. There's one other thing that you could do to this map. If you wanted to, you could take precinct 21 in Coolidge, and you could add it back to District 1, and you could take precinct 67 and put that into District 3, and that would bring the deviation down to 3.8.
Want me to go ahead
And you can show that, just to show what it looks like, because you can pull it right back, I know. So
I'm going to make a copy of this one and
sure.
start all over.
Because there have been comments that the deviations are too high and they want it to be more equal. So that's just a discussion item. In the interest of compactness also. One of the biggest issues we have with this county is that the population is center and west, and no one on the east, or very few people on the east. I shouldn't say no one, because there are people there. So it makes it very difficult to make small districts, or to make, again, the square districts, as you refer to.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Well,
Are you-
sorry, yes.
were you in the middle of a question?
No.
Okay. So any comment we've got up until today, we really need to give mayors and councils a chance to comment during the day today if they want to send us emails. But at tomorrow's meeting, there will be a public comment period, right? And it
There
could
will.
be, yeah. So letting people know if you want to give us your opinion, do it soon if everybody does lean towards D, so.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Kavanaugh.
if I may. So you mentioned a couple of precincts. I have an 8.5 by 11 map. May I borrow? I see you have a 1117 Supervisor Surdy, and you mentioned 2 precincts as a possible change. That was 27.
Yes, it's, oh, no, 21. Here, let me just show you.
Oh, I see. Okay, so there's 21. There we go.
This one going here, this one going.
Okay, I see. Okay.
He'll have it on the map in a minute.
Okay.
21 back to when? What was the other one, sir?
Sir?
What was the other one? The 21 back to
67.
the 67 back to which? To 3. To 3?
We need some music or something in here. It's so quiet. Oh, Mr. Goodman, the whistler. Here we go.
What's that?
Oh, Jeopardy. Yeah, here we go. Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, the question would be for Supervisor Miller, if that change were to occur, does Supervisor Miller believe that is still a serviceable district, having 67 included in District 3?
It's all good to me, you know, man. I mean, I got a lot of friends out there, so it doesn't matter. I got a lot of friends in Coolidge too, so.
It's merely for discussion in the interest of compactness to show what the district would look like, because everyone has been worried about the shape of the districts and how compact they are and easy to drive around. Mr. Quist, I say, oh, no.
It's safe to hear.
I hear a wow from the whistler.
No, I just looking at the differences, like you said.
It really drops them.
Brought the deviation down to 3.8.
Yeah, it does. Quite a bit.
Get much tighter.
One of the, as we were discussing this, somebody brought up, if this was a new county that had just formed and we didn't have any supervisors, how would the districts be drawn from scratch? I think this would probably be the one that would be closest to, you know, they've morphed over the years as it was set up from the 3 districts to 5. And so if you were starting completely new, how would it look? And it might look something like this. And in my district, I've got all the mountains and all the copper together. So that's what I see when I see District 5 in the north.
And it does bring all the districts to essentially hub off of Florence, which is good since it happens to be the county seat. Mr. Quist, do you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so essentially we've looked at what we might designate. Potential map D, and then this would be potential map E, just
Yes.
to kind of track the discussion and also maybe to guide public comments that come in this afternoon and tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Good.
and this is something that I think that the public as a whole needs to be, and we as board members need to be conscientious of and really look at the overall picture of all of this, is that all 5 of us, even though we've been voted in by our personal districts, we still have a responsibility to take in and govern for the entire county as a whole. And that's the part that needs to be remembered, especially in light of some of these areas that have been cut into, specifically my area. I've gotten a lot of comments about us splitting up my area as much as what we need to do in order to equal this out. And so it's vital that everybody remember, the public and us here on this board, that we govern for all, the five of us collectively. And that's the part that needs to be remembered. I think the five of us here get it, but sometimes our public doesn't quite get it as well. They think that we're the ones that call the shots on their behalf when it's really the five of us here that call those shots. And so just making the public aware, especially in my specific district, because of how much we're cutting this up, is that it's still going to have representation for the best service that we're going to be able to provide as a county for those geographical areas. So I want to make sure that that's very clear and made known, especially to my district.
And I would say that in the end, it's about relationships. And if you have relationships with someone in a different district, you're just going to call them, and then you're just going to work together with that supervisor.
That's it.
All right. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, a city council member from Coolidge emailed me, and I'm sure he'll have comment tomorrow concerning about splitting of Coolidge, and I'll have that discussion with him tonight, and perhaps he'll be here tomorrow.
So I guess what we're looking at, we've seen A and B and C, and now we've got D and E. And for public comment purposes, if we were to post D and E and ask for comment on those so that we could make a decision, I mean, if we assume that D and E are the better choices of all the other maps.
That is correct. And in fact, the way we have scheduled it for tomorrow, there is a special session to vote on the maps at 1 o'clock. So that gives the clerk of the board an opportunity to post the additional or any additional maps that you come up with. You now have a D and E, and if you come up with an F, she'll have the ability to have those posted so that the public will have those at least 24 hours beforehand. The goal was to conclude this meeting with some sort of consensus on the number of maps to be considered and the configuration of those maps, and to have that concluded probably no later than 12 today, so that the clerk had an opportunity to post and get them out to the public, by 12:30, 1 o'clock, giving and meeting the 24-hour statutory notice requirement. So that's the goal.
Okay, thank you. So, board, anyone want to propose what maps to put out there to consider?
Personally, I think D and E are probably the closest.
Okay.
That's me personally.
Where's E at?
The one that's up right now.
I think that's the one
That's the one we just changed with precinct 67.
It was here a minute ago.
Sorry, I was exporting it out. So
You're sneaking it around on me.
What the heck?
Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, while that's going on, we'll also, depending on how we conclude here today, is the way it's sounding is D and E will also be put onto the redistricting website so that there's a online portal for public comments also.
Sure. Thank you.
Are we waiting for E to come up?
We are.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, Mr. Kavanaugh.
I think we need to direct the county staff also to email members of the mayors and the city councils directly. It's on the public, it's published in the paper and in the website, but if we have that contact information, I think that'd be a wise idea.
Does that work for county staff?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Can I,
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm just curious on this map E, the city limits boundaries of Maricopa. Does that show up on here anywhere? I mean, can you highlight that? Can you bring that up? I didn't know if 67 runs into that or not. I'm just curious.
while they're searching for that, I just want to point out that in my lifetime in Arizona, we've had 3 governors that we didn't elect. They were all Secretary of States that were elevated. Kind of a similar.
Are you,
And then-
are you jockeying, Mr. Vice Chair?
No,
Is that what
also-
you're doing? You taking me out?
I'm about, no,
Checking.
Mr. Chairman?
you're number 430 in the line of succession for governor.
Oh,
as of
thank
right
you.
now.
Okay, good.
Mr. Chairman, we also elected a governor with only 33% of the vote one time.
Wow.
So, and back, for a little historical, I was around back when we were going to go from 3 to 5 supervisors, and the discussion there was, for simplicity, was to just mirror the junior college boundaries, and those would be the 5 districts, because they already had 5 districts being represented, and it was that's how it was supposed to start when they first were talking about moving to 5 supervisors. They stalled that off until until they got the census, and then they used the census data. But the conversion would have been to go right with the junior college boundaries originally.
I believe that shows you Maricopa city limit. Well, if he takes that off the screen a moment.
I just didn't know how far north that 67 went.
I believe Ak-Chin is 77, and 54 is out to the west of Ak-Chin, and 31 is south of Ak-Chin.
So the green is city limits?
Green is city limits, and 77 is Ak-Chin.
How were they able to go that far down and annex that little piece?
So it still does lap over here then, the city limits down.
It does into
Just
31.
right in there and just
Up
above that.
too.
And just above that, yeah.
Not much. May I say something about that?
You're already saying.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I will tell you, one of the big factors which has been really good is that working with Supervisor Surdy in some of our areas where they kind of coincide one another, and particularly around Schneff Road and that area right there with some of the issues that we've had, and having him a part of the conversations has been a big help in some of these areas where there is an overlap, especially in some of these areas. So just speaking from experience, and I think Supervisor Surdy would probably agree with that, is that having the 2 supervisors working together on common problems has always been extremely helpful.
This isn't a goodbye, Mike. I'll still see you from time to time.
No, but I was just
You're not breaking up?
Don't do that. Okay. So, all right. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. You know, it still kind of throws out that, it does cut into Maricopa a little bit there. So I don't know, I suppose we'll have to see how those comments come back. But it would still be that way with D and E.
Yes.
With D and E, because 67 doesn't even come close to it.
No.
Yeah. Okay, well, it answers my question.
Okay. So, no other comments? Boy, this is an easy crowd today. Whew. Okay, so we're going to have D and E up on the website for comments?
Yes, sir.
All right. No other comments? Then let's move on. Let's go.
The JPs.
Can you print that out for us so that we have that, please? Thank you. Okay, in that case, we'll move on. Item 2, it's a work session, re-precincting discussion regarding existing potential justice court precinct map and possible discussion formulation of additional map scenarios using county's mapping software. And, Mr. Quist, you have the floor again. So it says here anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a separate presentation on the Justice Court precinct map, but we can go ahead and pull it up and kind of follow the same pattern if the
Sure.
chair would. Oh, and Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I should note that there's a note I should make on the timeline in the resolution for the effectiveness of the Justice Court precinct map. The proposal would be to have it effective on March 3rd for election related purposes, voter registration purposes, but then delay the jurisdictional effectiveness of the courts until May 1st, which we're in contact with DPS and other law enforcement agencies, and they're requesting that so they have time, if they have paper citations or other things, that they have some lead time to update when they issue citations or people are going to different courts, that jurisdictional date would be May 1st as opposed to an immediate effective date. Yep. So I did want to make that comment.
Okay, thank you.
That's just clarification.
Go ahead.
That's May 1st of this year, correct?
Correct. Because they have an election coming.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think my question here, and I had some discussions with Justice Babu about these districts, and I informed him to make sure you talk to staff, make sure I didn't have any heartburn with the way that any of that was going to be drawn, whatever they thought was most efficient for the JP courts. I just want to be sure that they had plenty of input with staff to draw these lines, and I don't see them here, so I'm going to go with the assumption that they're probably good with this outline.
Well, and most of this just changed, the lines changed just a little bit because of the precinct size.
Right.
That's really all that happened.
That's really that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I know I had a good meeting, and I assured him to make sure that he put all that information to the staff so that as they drew these things, that their desires were heard.
Are there any other comments from the board? Man, you guys are easy. This is it?
Just for me, thank you, Mr. Chair. For me, it does clean up a little bit some of the issues that we've had as far as law enforcement in that particular area, that little sliver. And you've got residents that actually live in the Santan Valley area, but they're having to go to the Apache Junction Court when they could actually, it's a lot more convenient to be right there near the Santan Court.
And I think there's actually work in progress to correct that so that if a court is closer to you than another court, you may go to that court. We've had discussions about that.
Oh, that's good.
So, for instance, that little piece right there in 60 that switches over. It says, if you're on this side of the road, you go here. If you're on that side of the road, you go there. I think it's like, just go right up the street to that court.
That's good.
Let's solve that problem. But that's what there's discussions on the side about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments? In that case, that map's posted for public opinion. I would say this meeting's adjourned.